we have a shield love for baseball. If that's not,
yeah. All right, guys. So the last time the four of us together was during the NFL draft, but I want to remind you guys that this Sunday during the MLB draft, that Matt Holliday, who is last played in just 2018, his son was drafted number 1. I know there was another one that was drafted number 1, but freaking Matt Holliday's son was drafted number 1. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to 4 old men yelling at clouds. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz.
I'm Jay Kaplan.
I'm Anthony Strait, and yes, 40's right around the corner for yours truly. So what can I say?
And the oldest of the old men.
Joe Tufaro is here as well. Welcome to On the Sports Lines. Joe Tufaro is back with us as we are getting ready for another football season. Joe, plug away with what you want. Do you still have Officially Speaking? Do you what are you plugging today for us?
Nothing right now. We're gonna
Okay.
We're gonna see where we land this year. I'm not sure what I'm gonna do yet.
All right. We're at Tough Dan on all platforms, by the way, if you just want to see photos of every time he comes to New York. So on tonight's show, we are not yet past sports dead time, but we're going to give you a little taste of what's to come, just a little more, because NFL training camps are open. So we'll talk locals, we'll talk coaches on the hot seat, and we'll talk new faces of free agency. And unfortunately, one of those that was rewarded this offseason, not necessarily via a free agent, was good old DeShaun Watson of the Cleveland Browns. As DeShaun Watson has been cleared of any criminal charges for the alleged illegal things done to many, many, many massage therapists over a number of years, the law firm of Goodell & Goodell has yet to rule on what suspension Watson will actually get. It'll very likely be something. We just don't know how long. There are rumors that it was 2 to 8 games, but again, nothing is official until we actually hear it. While the Browns put language in Watson's contract despicably to make sure that there's no financial hit to this for Watson this season, the team will certainly take a regular hit if Jacoby Brissett, or as of today, possibly Josh Rosen, is starting a lot this season. The chosen one is back, ladies and gentlemen. Joe, what's next? We hope to have an answer by right now, but apparently, according to the NFL system, it just doesn't work that way. I think the legal process is quick.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wait till everything kind of plays out, make sure that they figure all this stuff out. Once he starts signing and stuff of that nature, he's sort of saying he's done this, but he's going to pay people off. He's making settlements. So once all that verbiage comes out, that's where you always get in trouble with the NFL, because you're saying, yes, I did it, but I'm going to make settlements with these people. He's saying he didn't do it, but I'm settling all this to get it behind me. They're not going to see it that way because there's a personal conduct policy and all of this stuff is going to take its own toll. I think he's going to get a substantial penalty because he deserves it. And they're not going to be able to sweep any of this stuff under the rug as much as they'd like to. So I think he winds up. It's unfortunate that the Browns kind of put himself in the position that he still, who cares how long he's suspended as far as he's concerned. If you're not going to lose any pay, that's kind of rough. And I'm not sure how the NFL gets around that, because they certainly want it to be a punishment without just punishing the team by not having a quarterback. You want to punish him, but if he's going to be sitting home and getting paid and to have all this money to have more massages, I'm not sure how that punishes him. So I don't know how this is going to work out. I think there'll be something creative in there, either with community service or some sort of, I don't know what it is, but they'll come up with something, and but it won't be as severe as it could be if he's going to get paid anyway. Again, he's only going to be able to get himself in more trouble, but they're going to come up with, but hopefully it does come down in the next 2 weeks so they can decide what they're going to do. I think the Browns owner is probably pushing Goodell to say, just tell me what you're going to do so we can get this behind us and at least know who's going to be on my team and who's going to be playing. So I don't know what it's going to be. I haven't heard any thing that makes any sense. They'll figure something out, but I haven't heard anything that's made any sense or any rumors about it yet.
Reckless speculation, unfortunately, and that's what the internet does very well. Anthony, recklessly speculate what's going to happen to DeShaun Watson.
You know what? What I was thinking about, and I've actually read something this on Yahoo. I was thinking about remember everything that happened with Ray Rice, and I think the NFL is trying to be very careful because remember when that situation took place, a lot of people, including myself, like the league was too lenient on Ray Rice, even though it's pretty much he never played an NFL game again. But in this case, I can't see him not being suspended for less than maybe 6 games. I think it's arbitrary. I think it's going to be at least 6 to 8 games. I think that is probably the number that ends up has a suspension. The thing is, though, I mean, I asked this question: what if he does get put on the commissioner exempt list? If, what happens from there? I mean, because that would leave open a possibility of him being suspended for an entire season. I think Josh Gordon, that happened to him as well. So I think, like I said, because you're still waiting to see what's going to happen as far as punishment, the legal, and other stuff they're legally tied up. Right now, it's all we can do is speculate. I mean, that was going to be 2 games, and the whole idea of DeShaun Watson, the Player Association, maybe suing doesn't make any sense because by the CBA, the commissioner's office does have the final say as far as discipline based on the player conduct policy. So I predict that's going to be at least 6 games, maybe 8 at the 8, but I don't see where it could go a full season. I don't know if it's going to even go that far, but he's definitely going to miss some games. So, and the Cleveland Browns, for what it's worth, they kind of put themselves in this mess in the first place. I mean, you traded for the guy, knowing all of this was going on legally, and there was a chance that DeShaun Watson could possibly not even play out all this season. By the way, he's be thanking his stars that he's not on trial right now for anything criminal, to say the least, let alone threatening to sue anybody over a suspension. But then you're basically jettisoning Baker Mayfield, so you don't have him as a backup option. So Cleveland just kind of put themselves in a mess as far as who's going to be the quarterback going into the season. I mean, you traded for a guy you knew who probably was not going to play for you at least the first month or so of the season. So I don't know what the Cleveland Browns would think. And you gave him all this guaranteed money.
Anthony,
basically going to be sitting at home getting regardless.
Before we get any farther, they didn't do it for now. They did it for later because that guy, DeShaun, is still a very young quarterback. You don't do moves for the season ahead, Jay. And you don't do moves for the season going on now. The Cleveland Browns are not as dumb of an organization.
Oh, yes, they are.
Well,
yes, they are. The only bright thing
I'll talk about that in a second, but I want your thoughts about the whole situation.
Yeah, the only bright thing they did in terms of that contract is they backloaded it. He's only owed a little over $1 million for this year. I mean, in terms of this whole situation, where the fracking hells do I start? This is another one of these stories, gents, that I can't wait to stop talking about. I mean, at this point, it doesn't matter to me what the final number of lawsuits that were settled. Once that number tops 20, it's all the same and it's all heinous. At this point, I don't care how often Watson claims he's innocent, that he never assaulted, disrespected, or harassed anyone, nor do I care that a Houston grand jury chose not to indict him on any criminal charges. Yeah, our system is based on a presumption of innocence, but where there's this much smoke, just saying. We live in the era of optics, and the optics for Watson, the Browns, and the NFL are just plain bad. The football optics alone on this have knowledgeable pro football people, including the 4 of us, ripping the Browns. They gave up 3 first-round draft picks, 1 third-round pick, and 2 fourth-round picks to get Watson, and then gave him a 5-year contract fully guaranteed for $230 million, the largest single contract guarantee in NFL history. I'm sorry, that's typical stupidity by the Browns. Add in, this impending disciplinary action, because the settling of the 20 of these lawsuits will have no bearing on what the NFL chooses to do. And a ruling from independent arbiter Sue Robinson is expected before the Browns begin training camp on the 27th. And if she rules that Watson did violate the league's personal conduct policy, she can issue a suspension of whatever length she sees fit. And the potential for that lengthy, possibly indefinite suspension, which could possibly have Watson ending up on the commissioner's exempt list, as Anthony said. And this has the makings of an epic Charlie Foxtrot of a black eye for the Shield. Zach Jackson, who's the beat writer for The Athletic for the Browns, he's written some really good stories detailing this situation. He ended one of his pieces in June with name lies among those who facilitated and ultimately signed off on the Watson trade. And there will be opportunities for the Browns to address what they knew and what they might have missed in their eagerness to get the deal done. Though it's highly unlikely that any of the team's top-level employees would admit it, a year-long suspension would confirm what this whole thing has been from the beginning, a mistake. Now, I'm really hoping that Watson gets suspended indefinitely because I'm just so done with him. His professions of innocence ring hollow, and I just want him gone. His presence is a reminder that the NFL still hasn't come as far as we'd like in terms of its players acting like rules or laws don't apply to them, especially in how they treat women, or not punishing them harshly enough to make them understand that playing professional football is a privilege, not a right. They can take the right steps in the right direction by throwing the book at Watson. The NFL needs to channel Clint Eastwood's curmudgeonly Marine gunnery sergeant Tom Highway from his film Heartbreak Ridge and tell Watson, don't go away mad, just go away.
Great. So we have a Clint Eastwood impression and a
I'm a little hoarse, so it's not as good as I usually am.
And a varied I just want him gone portion to the program. By the way, the reason why this is a backloaded contract is because if he gets suspended for the entire year, he takes a $1 million hit. So It's smart, but only smart because it's selfish. What else can I say that you guys haven't said yet? I think most importantly in this whole matter is DeShaun Watson. If you could have done any more worse PR for your own brand,
oh my God,
you've done it. I think, but it's just a bad situation for all involved. I think the Browns, again, we're not looking at this year. They're looking at 2023 through 2026. And I think that's what they thought. They see people, again, let me look at this in just a pure football standpoint. You see a Joe Burrow, you see a Lamar Jackson, who is going to very likely get re-signed for a ridiculous amount of money. And you see Pittsburgh, who is always going to be 8-8, no matter 8 and over 500, no matter
8-1,
9-8 now. I'm sorry, or 8-1 like it was last year. I think it was 9-7-6-1, but it doesn't matter. 9-7, it doesn't matter. But yeah, that's what the Cleveland Browns were thinking. They took a moral hit in this whole situation, and as we said before, you look at a move like that for the future, but unfortunately, the NFL is really not for long. And if they go through an embarrassing year this year, like they're planning to, it's not going to be smooth sailing in Cleveland once DeShaun Watson actually sees the field. Personally, I think this will go into August. I doubt this is going to get settled by June 27th, which is literally days from now, because I don't think the NFL cares about a timeline. The NFL wants to make the right decision for themselves as a organization, first and foremost, who will always have a public face. And I'm very curious to see what they do, because Trevor Bauer's not going to play another game again for Major League Baseball after what he did, which is almost in the way this same kind of situation that Watson is in. And I'm very curious to see if Roger Goodell in the NFL wants to do that with Watson, because the NFL is a star-driven league. You can have a league without Trevor Bauer, and honestly, easily have a league without DeShaun Watson. But storylines like that are always encouraged. So we'll see what happens. Period, full stop, because I want to talk about actual football. All right. The New York Giants. Last year, there were hopes and expectations under second-year head coach Joe Judge, and the result was unfortunately a 2.5 game decline from year to year to 4-13. Well, now those hopes and expectations fall on first-year head coach Brian Daboll of the Buffalo Bills organization. Let's see if that success can come down from New York to, well, New York. Can the Giants surprise? Technically, New York to New Jersey, but you know it. All right. Can the Giants surprise? Well, they need a good camp to actually do that first. So we're going to go to Joe, who is all things Giants. And Jay, let's start off by talking about the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this year, I mean, with anything, we start with Daniel Jones. So, I mean, while this is very likely a make or break year for him, it's also something of a fresh start as he gets to play in an offensive scheme that should be much more quarterback friendly than Jason Garrett's, and play for more creative offensive minds in Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka, who comes over from the Andy Reid Kansas City Chiefs system, where he was quarterbacks coach. He'll be the offensive coordinator. Not that it would take much to be a more creative mind than Garrett based on his play calling before he was canned last season. The Giants offense under Garrett and Joe Judge took the phrase risk averse to a whole new level as they pretty much shackled Jones, preventing him from being a playmaker out of fear of his propensity for turnovers. With the turnover, if you will, in coaching staffs, what are you looking for from Jones in his first training camp in the Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka offense?
Well, hopefully those guys get on the same page and figure out what they want to see. But the Brian Daboll offense, and it's going to be Kafka's offense, and it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of marry their two schemes together.
Mm-hmm.
Being that he's an offensive coach, he's obviously going to have some say in this. But all I'm looking for from Daniel, as you put it, Jay, is for him to get the chance to perform. And it's really, he needs the protection that he's never gotten. He needs the running game that he's never had. He needs some playmakers to make some plays for him. They got rid of Butterfingers Ingram and guys that drop balls, and they've gotten a lot of good playmakers in there that they brought in the last couple of years. They have a tight end that's actually the number one block supposed to do first. And then you kind of work them in as a receiver later. So, and, we've talked about it for years, Jay. They need some movement. They need some pre-snap movement. They need some way to get matchups.
Yeah.
You can't you can't work a matchup if everybody's just standing there. It's a little bit too simplified. And, you have a healthy Saquon Barkley, which we'll go into in a little while. You have, again, some guys that seem to be excited about being here. You've got some playmakers in Kadarius Toney and this other new kid from Kentucky, Wandell. And,
yeah.
I just think that there's going to be a lot of speed in there. There's going to be a lot of quick passes in there. There's going to be a lot of slants. There's going to be a lot of motion, reverses, and with guys that can actually run it instead of, again, Garrett's idea of reverse was giving it to Ingram, give it to the slowest guy on the offense, which never made any sense to anybody. So, but it's still going to come down to his protection and have they done enough to rebuild that line, and can he get into a rhythm? Because between his running ability, which is Josh Allen-like, and between his ability to get rid of the ball quickly and to throw to the right spots, he's really never been a turnover machine as far as interceptions go.
No,
he's
it's always
able to
been
get the ball to the sideline. He's able to throw it where he's supposed to, which is out of bounds, so only his guy can get it. He can make some stuff if he has time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always going to be the key to any quarterback's performance. But unlike, some sportscasters, some national guys have said, they're going to hate him once they start seeing what he can do. Well, no, it's the other way around. It's they're finally going to take his talents and use them to the way it should be used. And again, you're going to have a lot of quick movements, and you're going to have a lot of those quick screen passes and quick slants to those guys, to Wan'Dale Robinsons, to Barkley, to Toney, to those guys that get some more speed into the game.
Yeah.
And it's not this forced, no huddle stuff. We're going quick and saying, that's what we need to do to get matchups. Guys around, and you have to put different guys in different spots. they said, hey, we got Saquon Barkley, who you put out wide,
Nope.
which Garrett never did, but we talked about it
Yep.
100 times on this show. Nobody can
Nope.
cover him in a
Linebackers
regular
can't,
one-on-one.
safeties
You
can't.
put a linebacker out there, the game's over. So
Yep,
you
toast.
put a safety out there, the game's over. So I think all of that stuff will be creative. And again, a guy coming from an Andy Reid offense, you know, if he learned anything at all, it's about getting matchups and about moving guys around and putting them in the right spots. And, you know, maybe we will see some of these middle shovel passes and all that stuff as we get more into it. But I do think you're going to see Daniel Jones run a lot on some design runs. I think he's Josh Allen-like in that thing. He's very, very athletic. You know, the ball he caught last year was very impressive. So they know he's athletic and they know what he can do. I just think it's a matter of unleashing him a little bit. And, you know, everybody, like you say, Jay, went the other way. Garrett went to, oh, we need to protect them. I think these guys are going to unleash him and let him go. And, you know, Dable even said it in early with camp. You know, again, it's 7-on-7s. There's no, you know, there's no tackling or anything, but he said, let it go. I don't care if you throw interceptions in practice. Make your decision as quick as you can. Make your read. Let it go. See if you can get it in there. You know, force it now, which is what they did with Mahomes last year. I think you can get it in there. Try to get it in there, and then we'll figure it out from there of what plays work and what don't, and what we need to dial back a little bit. So that's what I'm looking for from him, is to be a little freer, to use his athleticism more, and see where it takes him. You know, he's on his basically walk year.
Yeah.
And, you know, if this
He
was
is on his
baseball,
walk year.
yeah, he's on that there. He's either going to get a nice contract at the end of the year to stay for 10 more years,
Changing
or
zip codes.
he's going to be in Carolina.
Or he's going to be a bat. I think this is his chance here.
Yeah.
What I'm actually by the way, what I'm very interested in is, by the way, I'm going to make a bold statement. I think if Daniel Jones has a very good bunch of skill position players out there, he's going to be better than Josh Allen as a running threat, because he is naturally made to almost be a runner first. He can actually do 50-50. Allen does all of his running stuff after the play is broken. So that's one thing. You mentioned something very interesting, by the way, with the Mahomes angle. I really do think the difference when Kafka kind of let Mahomes settle down, which was about the middle of the season, after the Giants game, is really the time when it's just like, throw the goddamn ball and you see what happens. Of course, it led them to losing against the Bengals, but a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Let's talk about offensive skill position players, Joe. There's really not too many choices about who needs to have a good training camp. You can think Kenny Galladay, just because you brought him in here to be a number one wide receiver and you paid him as a number one wide receiver, and he wasn't even a number 3 wide receiver last year because of the amount of time he was on the field. But again, everything, especially with the 3 big guys who have a lot to prove, has to do with staying healthy. Galladay has to stay healthy. Daniel Jones has to stay healthy. And most importantly, Joe, Saquon Barkley has to stay healthy, or Saquon can't really do much because he only knows one way to run.
Yeah, no, he's you know, the thing that he realized, and the thing that has come out about all this stuff about training camp with him, is he's finally just in a training camp. He's not rehabbing anything. He's not coming back from an injury. He's walking in from an off season where all he did was try to get stronger, and he's not rehabbing from anything big. So between his ankles and his quad and all that stuff, so, and his knee. So I think that again, he needs to show what he can do. Now, again, it's all tied in. You know me, I'm an ultimate. This is a team game. It's not an individual effort. But tied in with a new offensive line, if they can make some holes for him and they stick to a running game that actually has some positive yards, I think that'll help. That'll only help the entire offense and help Daniel Jones to be better. And again, not make it so obvious. I mean, the JC home, and you know exactly where everything was going to happen, to the point of guys walking to their little button hook spots, everybody running the same exact route. Well, the cornerbacks know that too, and all of that stuff was stopped. So I think having Saquon healthy behind a good line that he can communicate with. Again, using some motions, using some pulling, using a couple of different options of how to do to get him on the outside. That's where he makes his money. You know, they want him to run more north and south, but you want him to run to a hole. You don't want him to just run into the back of the guard because that guy can't block anybody. So I think their sets last year were too obvious with Garrett, that you knew his running game, you knew who was in the game, you knew what the Pittsburgh game, Jay, was the perfect example of Bud Dupree making every tackle on Saquon Barkley behind the line.
Yep.
Because he knew that he was getting the ball. I mean, it was obvious from how they were lined up. And you can't do that with that kind of offensive line. You know, you can do that with the old Giants line from the 80s. You could do that with Washington's offensive line from the 90s. You could do that with Dallas's offensive line in the 90s, that they could tell you where they were running the ball and they couldn't stop it.
No.
You couldn't do that with this group. And that's going to be a big part of the equation. But, you know, Rabbi, you're right. Everyone has to stay healthy. You know, they've already kind of lost their tight end for a couple of weeks here in the beginning. He's starting on the PUP list. But, you know, hopefully you don't have any of those completely where the guy's out for a year. And that's what they have to try to get through training camp with. And then you got to get all these guys back. The Sterling Shepard has to stay healthy.
Yeah.
You know, Galladay's got to stay healthy and get to work with their quarterback. Having all these guys out for extended period of time, even if it's just 2 or 3 games in a row, they never played with their full complement of players last year. They never had everybody on the field at once.
Not a lot of teams do, but I think especially if you're a team that needs to make that step up, the first step is getting a 5 or 6 game stretch and having a complement of players. Because the good teams can survive that because they don't. But the Giants honestly are kind of novices in having success, at least in this incarnation, in having a successful team.
Yep.
All right. Anthony, we're going to talk a little bit of defense now. Is that a thing?
Well, it's still a thing, but for the Giants, last season, they did take a bit of a step back. Injuries had a big part to do with that. They did play well in towards the second half. The Kansas City game, I think, was definitely the best performance defensively, considering that high-power offense. Unfortunately, the offense couldn't do anything in that Monday night loss. But now you bring in new defensive coordinator Don Martindale, who comes over from Baltimore, and he brings, the wink. It's a good way of calling him. And he brings a more aggressive style, attacking style to the Giants defense. In your opinion, going into the training camp, who are the players that you're going to be focusing on as training camp begins?
Yeah, you know, I talked to Rabbi earlier this week, and, you know, as I kind of ruminate over these questions and try to figure out, again, you know me, I'm a team guy, so it's hard to pick out people, but I really want to see what Thibodeau and Ojulari can do together. And if Thibodeau can kind of come in as Ojulari did last year, like if he doesn't need that year to ramp up because he's so talented and has such a good get off and has some of that quickness and he stays healthy, you know, we all know young guys get hurt at some point, but at least if he can start the season off and we can see what he has and get those 2 edge rushers to the point where they can set the edge plus rush the quarterback. I think that'll be a big plus for this defense. And then I want to see what Blake Martinez has in the middle, you know, coming back from a big injury. Can he be that steady guy that can stop the run, can still go back into pass coverage and allow these guys to do what they do? You know, Leonard Williams still up there. You still got some pass rush from the inside, from the interior guys, as well as these 2 studs. So I'm interested to see how quickly Thibodeau gets off and learns what's there. I know he's being mentored by a couple of former teammates, you know, in Mr. Strahan and a couple other guys that have been stopping by and kind of helping him with this is what it's like playing in New York. This is what, you know, here's some moves, here's some things you got to look for. I think being educated by some of these guys and all those guys being welcome in the building is big, which is kind of nice to see. Sort of like the Mets did this year, where they welcome some of their older guys back in to help teach and to do things. So I'm interested to see if he can look like a second-year guy instead of a first-year guy coming out of training camp and really put some pressure and put some excitement into the crowd, put some excitement into the defense, allow Martindale to be as aggressive as he wants. Know if the front part does its job, that protects the back part, which is where they're still a little light with experience, and we'll see how that takes off. So I'm excited to see him and how he comes out, and if they play in preseason games, what he shows, and if he's really as talented as he says he is, and as confident as he says he is.
High praise.
Yeah, and
High bar.
See if he becomes a leader on a team like that, where even though he's a young kid, if he really is as good as he says it is, and he's exciting to play with and exciting to watch, and he's making plays in the backfield, next to Leonard Williams and with Otsl on the other side, that can kind of get this. And, they were awful in the first half of the year on third down last year, especially opening day. You know how that stadium gets on third down and how loud it can get and how excited they are.
Yeah.
So if they can recreate some of that, I think it'll go a long way. So that's who I'm looking to see how much energy he can bring.
Yeah, I know. Like, and you mentioned that he's not showing on confidence, and that's the start. But I can just picture Michael Strahan and Otsl when you're coming in, just sitting the guy down and show him a tip of Super Bowl 42. Like, you see what we did to Tom Brady? You can do that too. So they're looking for him to kind of pick up that giant tradition of being a pain in the real end to opposing quarterback. So it's on the Thibodeau to really kind of pick it up and right away, because he's going to be playing a very aggressive defense. I watched the Ravens defense last 2 years, the Martindale calling the shot, and they got after the quarterback from all angles. So I mean, I'm kind of looking at that as well. Looking forward to seeing if the Giants can replicate that kind of success with that scheme.
Let me tell you something, though. If you look at that first half of the schedule, you have a lot of opportunities to get at terrible quarterbacks like Ryan Tannehill, whoever wins the Carolina job, Justin Fields. Whoever loses the Carolina job, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence. You have whoever starts for Seattle. You have probably Davis Mills. There is a lot of opportunity for that Giants defense to really get it going really quick. And I'm very interested to see it. I'm all full of excitement today. Don't show me this tape. Don't show me this tape in 2 months. It's like, you said this. I'm like, no, I didn't. All right. The New York Jets actually went the other way. They improved 1.5 games last year to 4-13. But Robert Saleh, second-year head coach, doesn't want to end up like the last second-year head coach I just mentioned in Joe Judge. So let's get to our person we asked to do the research. If you know someone who's a Jets insider, call me so Joe doesn't have to answer this question.
Please.
Okay.
Let me know.
In the vein of the offseason for Zach Wilson, I'm going to quote one of my favorite songs by Fountains of Wayne. Zach's mom's friend has got it going on. She's all I want, and I've waited for so long. That's his biggest accomplishment in 2022 so far. Jay, can he have more accomplishments?
God, I hope so. And I got to tell you, way too many people have had way too much fun with that whole mom thing. In some cases, it's been hilarious as hell, but
it's gotten him confidence, actually, shockingly enough.
Maybe, but let's nudge the conversation about the
field. Yes, it's time to start talking about
here. So we all talked at length last year about how his injury, he missed 4 games in the middle of the season, showed that the issue with Mike LaFleur's offense was not the scheme, but the quarterback running it, as the likes of Mike White, Joe Flacco, and Josh Johnson all put up some solid performances, most of which were better than the best game that Wilson had all of last season. He was 30th in passing yards, 33rd in completion percentage and passer rating, 31st in touchdowns and yards per attempt, and he was the 3rd most sacked quarterback in the NFL. He seemed unwilling or unable to get out of his gunslinger mindset, trying to make the big play on every play, confident, arrogant, that he could fit the ball into any and every throwing window, which was something we talked about. It was a concern of ours on draft night when the Jets took him at 2. We were concerned that the throwing windows he'd see in the NFL would be demonstrably smaller than the ones he saw at BYU. His refusal to make the simple play, to take the layup, as his coaching staff said, was frustrating to watch. And so far this offseason, it seemed to carry over to OTAs, struggled with his accuracy, decision-making was questionable at best, leading to interceptions and near interceptions. He threw several passes that if it were in a game, he would have had his receivers in position to get their heads taken off. Now, granted, Joe, as you're fond of saying, OTAs are, 7-on-7s, 11-on-11s. There's no tackling. It's not the best scenario of real football. But, with all that in mind, what happened last year, what we've seen so far in the offseason, what changes or improvements to his game or his mindset are you looking for from Zach Wilson as he comes into his second training camp, which is supposedly where quarterbacks are supposed to make the jump?
Yeah, Jay, I think it's again, I was talking to Rabbi earlier this week, and it still comes around. He needs a line in front of him, because you can't really ever figure out what a guy is if he doesn't have the time to actually run the play that was called. And again, does he then start to, the old Sam Darnold see ghosts type of thing? And does he start getting it in his head? I have to run on every play. I have to make every play work because I don't have any time to do. I'll call the play in the huddle, but I know I can't run it because I don't have any time. So, they made the mistake of drafting that Becton, even after everybody told him he was a loser. And, he goes out and he decides he's going to work out by himself. He's not going to go to OTAs. And he comes in weighing, 80 pounds more than he was supposed to. So, who knows if that guy's ever going to play again. He's probably going to get hurt most of the time. So I don't think that helps any. But, you said, I always get hit when you bring statistics up, Jay, because you said he was the 33rd lowest. I go, well, there's only 32 teams. How did it become the 33rd best quarterback, which means he was worse than a backup than that is playing. 7.6 was his accuracy, his completion percentage. His overall rating was 69, which I think is the lowest. Yeah, at 156 being number one, your highest rating, I think 69 is the lowest.
158.3 is a perfect NFL passer rating.
Right. So the perfect bad one has got to be around 68, 69. They can't
like that.
It's sort of like if you sign your name, you get
200 points, right, on the SAT. Yep.
And then if you spell it right, you get an extra 20 points. So I just think that he needs, hopefully this, and again, I have a lot of trust in this coaching staff to figure it out. And he didn't have anybody except for the 8 games that Elijah Moore played well to look for, to figure out who the go-to guy was. He has line. Again, he was hurt, so they were going in and out. Was he going to play? Was he not going to play? So, he certainly showed enough athleticism. He obviously has a big arm, which is fine. Again, when there's nobody around you and there's no pads, he's got a big arm. He can throw it 80 yards in the air. Congratulations. You'll never get that opportunity in a real game. So, what can you do and how can you improve? And his accuracy, as again, they talk about Daniel Jones being, not good and not here's a guy who has a 55% completion percentage. That's awful these days. I mean, they're talking, a good quarterback has 67%, percent. The elite guys are up there even higher than that. And with no interceptions, like an Aaron Rodgers, who has 2 interceptions all year long, and one of them's a drop ball or a tip pass. So he has to get much, much better at running the play, at figuring out where he's going with it, identifying his target quicker, getting rid of it, not looking to, because don't forget, his predecessor did the same thing. I was like, oh, how exciting is Sam Darnold? He runs all over the place, and then he's able to throw it downfield. We're not going to win any games that way.
Nope.
And usually the time when you get away with that is when the game's already lost and the defense is just standing back there going, yeah, go ahead, run around all you want. You're wasting time. You may throw one down the field that gets, get a penalty.
Yeah. And
at
that's
that
the
point.
frustrating thing about it to me, Joe, is that, LaFleur's scheme, which is essentially Mike Shanahan's scheme, that scheme will run receivers open. The Jets have plenty of guys to throw the ball to. Wilson just needs to deliver it on time and, to the right guy in the right spot. That's why the scheme is considered so quarterback friendly. So it kind of boggles your mind when the most talented quarterback on the team is the guy who seems to be the most unfriendly when it comes to that scheme.
I think we mentioned it early in training camp. I think we all mentioned it about, what a joke it was that they got Flacco to be his backup, because again, he doesn't match up to. That's why he had to leave Baltimore, because he couldn't be a backup for a quarterback like Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
He can't practice the same plays.
No.
The fact that you put in Mike White and you put in Flacco and you win games,
Yep. Mm-hmm.
and they look fine and they look steady and they look good, and their completion percentage had to be much
both,
higher.
mid 60s.
Yeah, so it's there, like you said, the system is there, but he needs to run it. And maybe after, again, a year where you were hurt, a year where you were learning something new, it's your first year in the league, maybe somebody can now take him aside and go, hey, if those guys can do it, you should be able to do it twice as good.
Yeah.
Plus you have all the tools. And I'll do it as a joke. Is he a Sam Darnold where he refuses to learn because he's not writing anything down? He's just going to do it his way anyway.
Yep.
I don't think that that's his mentality, but who knows? Maybe he's still, like you guys said, got that gunslinger type thing where he's going to prove them wrong. That
outside of Mac Jones, they're at nothing about the quarterbacks that played last year. I can't tell you if Zach Wilson is good or bad. I can't tell you if Trevor Lawrence is good or bad. I need more work, and I think this is the real season to do that. I mean, They're going to need some appreciable growth from Zach Wilson in the division. That's pretty damn tough.
No doubt.
Okay. Let's talk the mess of wide receivers that the Jets have. And again, they're not bad, but they're not spectacular. Like Joe Flacco to Denzel Mims doesn't really make me want to turn on Red Zone and be like, ooh, this touchdown is exactly what I was looking for. Mike White to Corey Davis is just not the type of excitement that I think my fantasy team is really looking for on a Sunday. And that's really all I care about now, seemingly, because we're out of it by week 7 or 8. But let's just talk about it. Out of the wide receivers that you see, there are 5 out there who are going to get reps. Denzel Mims, who was probably the most criticized of all of the Jets wide receivers. Braxton Berrios, who's done things for that team last year. Garrett Wilson, their number 1 draft pick, who they probably have the highest upside on. Corey Davis, who is a very reliable number 2 or number 3, who they got in free agency a year ago. And Elijah Moore. Ole Miss wide receivers don't usually miss in the NFL, and considering who his quarterbacks were last year, Elijah Moore did pretty good. So out of those 5, who are you looking at?
Well, I think Elijah Moore showed the most promise when he was on the field. So if he can stay healthy and build on his second half of the season that he had, he could be a big help. Again, he seems to work well in that system. He seems to be able to run the routes they're asking the route. He didn't catch balls just. It wasn't Kansas City where Tyreek Hill just goes out and runs somewhere and gets open. He actually did run some routes, and they talk about him being a good route runner and knowing what he's doing. He's got good hands, got some good speed. So I think if he develops into that guy that everybody can trust, then it kind of brings the rest of the group up. But they're going to need somebody other than him to step up and to get a little bit more consistent. And again, we don't really know if it's Wilson not reading it correctly and not seeing who's the wrapper guy that's open, or are they not running the right routes? It's the Odell Beckham thing. He used to change the route in the middle. If you have a quarterback that has time that sees that, that's fine. If not, then all of a sudden you're looking at your second and your third and your fourth receiver, and you don't have that kind of time. So I think that he's the guy with the most upside. Again, if he stays healthy. But again, young guys get hurt. We all know that. So hopefully his second year he comes back and builds on his second half that he had that was very, very good. And but again, I still think it comes down to can they build an offensive line that allows these guys to do what they're supposed to do.
I never actually thought it was build the line and build everything around it. But honestly, with Giants and Jets, we're learning that is definitely the case. All right, defense again. Does it matter, Anthony? Sometimes in the NFL, I didn't know if they were allowed to make plays anymore.
It's still the NFL, not the Big 12. Come on now.
And look,
getting close.
Getting close. And look, the Jets last year defensively was 32nd in the NFL. They were so bad last year. There was literally a stretch where they gave up 500 or more yards in 4 games over the course of a month. There was one game in particular against the Colts on Thursday night. I think Indianapolis could have basically named a score. It was that bad. I mean, the Indianapolis just ran all over them that game. But obviously, Joe, you watched the draft like the rest of us. The Jets obviously drafted made some defensive draft picks. Sauce Gardner being in particular. They signed. They try to revamp that secondary in particular, which is very young and inexperienced going into last season. But there were some couple of key pieces missing up in the front seven also. So going into the camp, is there someone in particular that you are looking forward to or keeping your eyes on in year 2 of Jeff Uber's defense?
Let's talk, what I mentioned when we had this conversation was, somebody like a CJ Mosley who's coming back off an injury and stuff, he still has to be the leader of this defense. He's the one who knows how it works. He knows how it's supposed to work. He knows he's the most veteran guy on that group. And again, these kids that they brought in, but it's a bad place for them to be because not only are they hyping themselves, but the Jets have got shows on with Rich Eisen and what's his Schefter doing all this stuff about how great they're going to be and how fantastic this draft was. And, it was perfect. It was the most perfectly executed offseason. I'm like, you're setting yourself up to be the losers that you are. And you're going to let this kid who comes in wearing all the jewelry and all the stuff, and he's the greatest cornerback that ever played in the NFL. And, you're going to get burned out on your first couple of games, and you're going to get booed in that stadium. And it's not going to be your fault. It's just going to be because you're too cocky to be playing there. And they push that stuff on them to try to make them the best that they can be. So I think a veteran who can become the obvious leader of that defense and get them in the right positions on the field, because again, it's fine to do it in practice and it's fine to do it one-on-one. The guy never got thrown out in the SEC because he was so good. Well, that doesn't mean anything in the NFL. There's not one quarterback that's going to go out and see him standing there and go, oh, I'm going to throw to the other side all day long. If you don't think Russell Wilson and Mahomes and all those, let's see how this works. And that's the challenge he's going to get. And we'll see if he's any good. And again, his confidence may be all that stuff. But if he doesn't become, at this point, if he doesn't become Darrelle Revis, he's a failure. That's how he's setting himself up for. And I just think that makes it tough on the rest of the team because this guy's like, oh, I'm going to be the guy that makes the difference. And, that's not how it's going to be. You still got to get that pass rush. You still got to stop the run. You still have to do a lot of different things. If he's just going to stand out there and play patty cake during running plays, like we see other guys do and just take himself out and leave them playing 10 on defense, then that's going to be a downfall for this team. So hopefully they get the veteran leadership back. He can play to the level that he was brought in here to play, talking about Mosley, and kind of be the leader to get everybody set up and spots. Just, as bad as some of the local teams have been in past years, they were the worst last year to the point of losing games late, letting guys walk right down the field at the end of games. Just as you say, the amount of yardage that they gave up was amazing at times. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and I also throw in too. Getting Lawson back off the Achilles injury, maybe that helps. But with Gardner, I think I hear a lot of Antonio Cromartie comparisons more than Joel Rivas. I think the Jets will gladly take him playing like Cromartie if it leads to improving that secondary, which will just
But
really
again,
just got torn to shreds more than most weeks.
Ourselves line, don't leave him in Canton yet.
Yeah.
If you go play in the Hall of Fame game, don't leave him there yet. Let him do something, even in a preseason game, before you put Antonio Cromartie on him.
Yeah,
seriously. Who played for 3 different teams and was good and bad and had some moments. Again, who did he have on the other side?
He was serviceable.
He had some, he's a solid defensive back. I'm just saying, don't put that on the guy yet. Let him show up and practice first. We'll go back to the Allen Iverson. Can we have practice first? Can we see if the guy can cover his own poor receiver? Again, who's he covering in practice? Nobody. They don't have any wide receivers. We just had this conversation. You got a guy who's a 55% thrower, receivers who can't get open, and a guy who doesn't know the system to throw the ball, and you're going to make this defensive back out to be the greatest thing since Lawrence Taylor. It's the wrong way to go about it. And the Jets do this all the time.
Yep.
Let's hype as much as we can and because those fans get excited about it. See Sam Darnold 3 years ago. How exciting they were to get Sam Darnold. Oh, we moved up. That's the guy we wanted. Thank God the Giants passed on him. Thank you so much for not drafting him. And you wind up, he's not even in town anymore. So, let's just let it develop. But I don't think he can prove anything until he gets on the field against Tom Brady and a couple other guys, who know what they're doing. Because guys like that, more looks as the game goes along. And if you're just some bump and run guy that's going to stand there all day, you're going to get hammered.
I look at the schedule and I see home for Baltimore, at Cleveland, home for Cincinnati, at Pittsburgh, home for Miami, at Green Bay, at Denver, home for New England, home for Buffalo, and that takes them to their bye week. I know I feel like we've been unnecessarily bashing the Jets in this segment, but honestly, you see a win in those 9 games. I kind of don't.
No, I mean,
even the Cleveland and Pittsburgh games are the easiest ones, and they're on the road.
Yeah, you look at the quarterbacks that that they're going to face in that opening stretch of the season, and it doesn't matter how good Sauce Gardner was in Cincinnati. And let's be fair, he was really good. He was probably the best cornerback in the nation last year. But that's college football. The game is different at the NFL level. We all know this. The quarterbacks are better. And I'm sorry, whatever your college resume was, all that does is have, professional football playing quarterbacks go, ooh, let's see how you really are.
Well, it's all about, let me just say this. About confidence. The next step, though, is humility. So let's see which one he has. But you do have to give him credit for at least trying. But the punishment may be a little worse than the crime.
Well,
okay.
Rabbi, as Crash Davis said in Bull Durham, you got to learn to play this game, and it applies to football as well as baseball. You got to learn to play it with equal parts fear and arrogance.
Coming up, Jay will then quote a 90s movie to keep us through, to keep us going on the timeline.
I'm just quoting a sports movie, and that movie...
No, it's a very good movie, but I'm just saying, after the Eastwood one, I'm glad that we actually moved up. All right. With apologies to new Jaguar Christian Kirk, new Cardinal Hollywood Brown, and new Raider Devontae Adams, your goddamn diva wide receiver attitudes did not get you in this segment for old faces and new places. Maybe next transaction when you guys think you're underpaid. All right. So who's moving on to a spot that we're looking at? Jay, start us off. What transaction move are you looking at in this 2022 training camp?
I'm looking at the guy I've been looking at ever since last season ended, and that's Baker Mayfield, who is moving on from the Cleveland Browns to the Carolina Panthers. And we've known that he was going to be part of this segment the minute the Browns went out and gave away the store for DeShaun Watson, even with Mayfield's contract being fully guaranteed. The only question was what new place would this old face end up calling, home? For the longest time, I thought it was going to be Seattle. I said so numerous times on the show. Rabbi,
And I
shut
said
down
no, and I
more than
won.
once. And I'm still surprised he's not a Seahawk. But Carolina was the other destination I thought was possible landing spot for the former 2018 number 1 overall draft pick. And despite everything he did during his time in Cleveland, yes, there were plenty of downs to go with the ups. It never really seemed like the organization was all in on him. It's ironic that in 4 seasons, Mayfield compiled the most wins as a starter, most completions and most passing yards, most passing touchdowns of any quarterback in the post-1999 Browns era. His 2020 season resulted in a playoff berth for the Browns, their first since Mayfield was in grade school, and probably showed us what his ceiling could be. A little under 63% completion percentage, 7.3 yards per attempt, 3,563 yards passing, 26 touchdowns versus 8 picks and a passer rating of 95.9. His 2021 play was inconsistent, and it showed as all of his numbers were worse than 2020. Completion percentage down to 60.5. Yards per attempt was about the same, 7.2. Yards passing dropped to barely over 3,000. Touchdowns went down to 17. His picks went up to 13. Passer rating dropped to 83.1. Yeah, it was a season plagued by injuries. He played with a torn labrum in his left non-throwing shoulder from week 2 onward. And, it was also plagued by battles, both public and private, with head coach Kevin Stefanski, leading to neither one trusting each other very much for the rest of the year. And while those two things had a lot to do with his struggles, Mayfield is not without blame for how things went down. His aggressiveness and overconfidence, some would say arrogance. Wait, haven't I used those words about a quarterback most recently? In his ability, repeatedly got him in trouble with things like bad footwork and ill-advised throws at the worst times. Those mistakes were magnified and low-lighted by his 17.8 passer rating in the final 4 minutes of a game last season when the Browns trailed by 1 possession or less. I'm sure the shoulder injury didn't help, but Mayfield's career passer rating for that same scenario is 51.1, which ranked 59th in the NFL. His 19 career interceptions in the fourth quarter are second most in the league since 2018 when he came in. And now it's on to the Panthers and a new complex offense to learn from offensive coordinator Ben McAdoo, a very familiar face to the Giant fans in this room. And the quarterback competition with another top 3 quarterback pick from the 2018 draft in Sam Darnold, a very familiar name to no Jet fans that are in this room, and a new fan base to win over, one that's been starving for decent quarterback play since the MVP heyday of Cam Newton. Now, it helps that Mayfield already knows the Panthers' line calls, having been with offensive line coach James Campen in Cleveland in 2019. There should also be a much improved offensive line to work behind, as well as the return to full health of running back Christian McCaffrey. Mayfield's will also have 3 solid wide receivers in DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, both of whom have 1,000-yard seasons on their resume, along with a former teammate, Rashad Higgins, who put up nearly 600 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns in both 2018 and 2020 with Mayfield throwing to him, and he's in the running to be the starter in the slot. Will Mayfield be a schematic fit for McAdoo's offense? Honestly, guys, that depends on how much it resembles the Browns scheme that leaned on a solid run game rather than Mayfield's arm. That excellent 2020 season was partly due to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt combining for almost 1,900 yards and over 20 touchdowns. They hammered teams on the ground with those 2 guys, which didn't put Mayfield in situations where he had to throw into so many tight windows to move the Browns offense down the field. In the 4 years that McAdoo was either Giants offensive coordinator or head coach, the team regularly finished towards the bottom of the league in rushing, but none of their number 1 running backs could be classified as tier 1 like McCaffrey. In the 2 seasons where CMC played the full season as running back 1, he averaged 1,245 yards rushing and a tick under 5 yards a carry on the ground, and the Panthers in the top half of the league in rushing. They can keep that up, and Mayfield is healthy. His skill set should be an improvement over Darnold's. And yes, Joe, I know that's a low bar to clear. Mayfield has a long way to go to rehab the image and narrative that's followed him from Cleveland, that he's immature, hard to coach, and a divisive personality in the locker room. But if he can find that 2020 magic, do some growing up, and be a real leader on and off the field, he may just resurrect his career. It'll make that opening day game against the Browns must-see TV.
We better be starting that game, or I'm going to be pissed
Maybe do
off.
a few less. Maybe do a few less Geico commercials too.
Maybe. I will tell you this: the combination of Ben McAdoo having a quarterback battle between Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield is like a Joe Tufaro comedy script being written on paper. It's so magical that he could just make a book out of it, because we've talked many years about that happening. By the way, the last team to have a number 1 and number 3 overall draft pick from the same draft class on their team won the Super Bowl in 1980 with Jim Plunkett and Dan Pastorini, who went 1-3. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen here, but
No,
who the hell?
no chance in hell.
Yeah, so the NFL, the Bengals made it to the playoffs, made it to the Super Bowl last year. I'm never going to say never on anything, especially because that's not a great division outside of the Bucs. That they could very well be second if they try. All right, Anthony. Matt Ryan is not a Falcon anymore. What world are we living in?
Yeah, he's it was one of those moves that kind of got lost in the shuffle when we had the DeShaun Watson trade and Devontae Adams and just so many things going on. But Matt Ryan now at Indianapolis Colts. I think about this 3 years ago, Andrew Luck retired, just out of the blue, and it's like the Colts are just not being able to find any stability at quarterback since, despite the fact that all the other skill positions they're actually pretty good. You think about it, they got their quarterbacks from that Jacoby Brissett. We talked about him earlier in the show. Philip Rivers, who was pretty much 1 foot out the door, and Carson Wentz, who was another new guy, old face and new face player that was on the move in the offseason. And now they settle on the 37-year-old former MVP who didn't have a bad season in Atlanta. He threw for just under 4,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, going 12 interceptions. Just wasn't a great year by his standards. When you think about, he only had Calvin Ridley for 5 games. He had no running game to speak of, and the offensive line was a disaster. I mean, they won a game against the Giants that the Giants did everything they could. They actually give the game away. But the Falcons around Matt Ryan was not a good team overall. But now he goes to a team that has a stud running back in Jonathan Taylor. We know what he can do. And he has obviously Michael Pittman Jr. as the wide receiver, still a very rock-solid defense. And a team that pretty much is kind of upset over how things ended last season when they had a chance to win their way into the playoffs. They went to Jacksonville and Carson Wentz happened. And which is why he's out of the which is why he was pretty much the first plane or bus ticket out of town after that performance. So there's the kind of, again, it's a patchwork quarterback situation with Matt Ryan. Maybe Ryan gets an opportunity to kind of revive his career, being on a downside of it, at least towards the end of the career. He gets one more crack at a winning team because the Colts are a solid team in a winnable division. And when you look at the AFC South, Tennessee really being, the only other threat in that division. So it'll be interesting to see how Indianapolis start out. I think Matt Ryan is going to be more of a ball control quarterback guy. He's not going to be the Matt Ryan of old, and let alone the MVP Matt Ryan we saw in 2016. But I think he's a guy, if he can keep the interceptions down, which he's been able to do his whole career, a solid quarterback percentage. Think about this. He had no offensive line and still had a 90% rating last year. So Matt Ryan still has something in the tank. It's going to be a question of, is it enough to get Indianapolis not just back into the playoffs, but maybe some kind of a postseason run? Because the Colts overall is a solid team, but again, for the last 3 years since Andrew Luck's retirement, they just haven't had that stability at obviously the most important position on a football team. Maybe Matt Ryan, at least for this season, could be a pretty good placeholder until they can, at some point, figure out a way to get a future quarterback that can play 5 or 6 years into this organization.
Yeah, it's a great move. I really think it's a great move by Chris Ballard, the GM of the Colts, to finally get an adult in the quarterback room, something they haven't had in a while.
Debatable.
And also,
Debatable on Rivers being not an adult. I think he has a gunslinger mentality, but his year with Indianapolis, not in the playoffs, by the way. When's the last time they've been in?
yeah,
So,
he was definitely game manager mode by that time. I mean,
but the problem,
his
but you're going to
gunslinger days were
accept.
pretty much in the past.
Yep. You're going to expect that, though, a little bit out of Matt Ryan. By the way, double-digit interception seasons in 4 out of the last 5 years, between 11 and 14. But I think he can keep them down to single digits with this team. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I did say we were not going to talk about diva wide receivers, but I do have to mention Tyreek Hill going into the Dolphins. It's only because of the fact that there's just so many different things that this opens up. Now, you talk about how Devontae Adams' lack of being there is going to affect Green Bay, but Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers, and yes, they have no names available, but they still have a pretty good system, and Aaron Rodgers is a back-to-back MVP quarterback for a reason. Mahomes is still Mahomes and does Mahomes things, but he's going to be throwing to guys the likes of Juju Smith-Schuster, who may or may not have hit past his prime. And yes, he does still have Travis Kelce, but he has a lot of unproven guys. So we're going to see a lot of what Kansas City can do, especially in that division. Now, for the team that he's actually on, Miami, it's very interesting for many different reasons. I think, unlike a lot of other people, I think Tyreek Hill can still be a very effective wide receiver. Remember, he didn't play with Patrick Mahomes his whole career. He played with Alex Smith his first 2 years, and he had 13 touchdowns and an average of 800 yards for each of those 2 seasons. And remember, in 2016, he was just really getting acclimated into the offense, and he was really used more as a dual threat guy, 598 receiving, 267 rushing. Once they stopped that, he actually became a 1,000-yard receiver. He would have been a 1,000-yard receiver for 5 straight years in a row had he not been injured for 4 games in 2019. But the question is, where does Tyreek Hill, number one, fit on a team that does have stars? Remember, one of the best tight ends in football last year, especially when it came down to the red zone, was Mike Gesicki. And Gesicki was one of the most reliable tight ends in that red zone. And then there's Jalen Waddle, who had 104 catches in his rookie year for 1,025 yards. We've seen what that Alabama legacy of wide receivers has done in the NFL, and you don't expect Waddle to do any more than go up. And then there's Tua Tagovailoa, which is going to be, I think, the quarterback that I think everybody's going to need to watch in this offseason. A guy who was rumored to be out of Miami 9,000 million times for DeShaun Watson. Watson never came to Miami, so this is Tua's job. There is no one breathing down his neck anymore. It's Tua plays well and becomes the quarterback for Miami's future and actually leads an offense that has more talent than the New England Patriots easily and can compete with Buffalo talent-wise on offense. But the quarterback needs to be a lot better. And if that doesn't happen, then Tyreek's numbers really drag down from the 1,200 yards he had in 2020 and 2021. And then we see what Tyreek Hill is really like. Is he going to be the guy who is given the peace sign for all of his touchdowns? And of course, the other guys are getting flagged for it. Is he going to be one of the wide receiver faces of the NFL like he's been the last 4 years? Or is he going to become a Jag? Just another guy who would never, ever become the player he was under Mahomes. It's very simple. It's the chicken and the egg situation. Did Mahomes make Hill, or did Hill actually do this all by himself? And did Hill help Mahomes? We're about to find out that answer. Joe, back to your regularly scheduled quarterbacks suck-up fest already in progress.
Yeah, I'm just interested to see what Russell Wilson does in Denver, because I was amazed that Pete Carroll let him go, being that Pete Carroll's probably on his last couple of years in Seattle. He's getting to doing this. I think he's lost a lot of players over the years. It's kind of hard for him to be a rebuilding person. So I was surprised that they let him go as easily as they did. and after watching Denver last year, as good as their defense is, and they played half the year without Jerry Jeudy, they played half the year without Noah Fant, and they still won a lot of games with Teddy Bridgewater, and they look good doing it. So I think their system is very good. I think their system's always been good. Their offensive system, their running game's always been good. Now they've got Cortland Sutton, and they have Jerry Jeudy, and they have a couple other guys that can really, really play the game. I think it'll be interesting to see how good Russell Wilson is behind the offensive line, to the point where he's not running for his life a lot of times and not throwing on the run a lot. He still has that ball that, Jay and I talk about all the time, that we're not thrilled with the way he throws it at a 45-degree angle. But, he is 5'8" or whatever the hell he is. He's 5'10". So,
5'10",
he does have to do that. But, he doesn't have a Metcalf, which, again, I think a lot of those guys took away from Russell Wilson, because Metcalf's one of those guys you have to get the ball to, right? He's the playmaker. He's the guy that's going to be complaining he doesn't get thrown at enough, who makes a flashy play once or twice a game, but he's not consistent enough. I think having guys like Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, that stuff plays into Russell Wilson getting back to where he was, and he's young enough to take this team for the next couple of years. And that's what this team has seemed to have done. I know that Elway's not there anymore, but this is kind of their mode of how they do it. The team's been sold, and there's a couple of different things that are going on there, but this is their thing, is they go out and get that quarterback. They get the Peyton Manning to replace a Tim Tebow, who, they could have built around, but they realized they have the team to go ahead and be good and compete and to win. And I think their defense is that good that they feel like this is actually a piece that they needed. Unlike some teams that trade for a guy or sign a free agent when they're not one piece away, they were obviously having Teddy Bridgewater run this offense, but he did really well in it. And I think that Russell Wilson's going to bring that to the next level. And, they're in a tough division. They needed to do something to stay up there. You're going up against Justin Herbert. You're going up against Mahomes. You're going up against whatever happens in Vegas. You needed to do something to move this up and to continue to compete, unless you were just going to tear it down and start over again and come back in a couple of years. So I think this is the right move for them. I'm shocked that he was let go from Seattle, that they just let him kind of walk away from the situation. And but I think he landed in a really good spot for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, Jay talked about it a lot. Seattle just didn't think they had the pieces to really compete with the Rams, San Francisco, and Arizona year to year, and they said we need a better plan, and that's why they're in a position where they're going to be starting to rock on week one, unfortunately. Remember, week one, Denver and Seattle is going to be one of the most emotionally charged games. I don't know if that's the greatest thing for Russell Wilson to get that game out of the way in week one, or
I
if
think
it's
it
the
is.
worst thing. I think it is too, but it could also backfire, and it could just really set off a really bad September, because again, any division game is going to be a bloodbath. And we'll talk more about the AFC West in just a moment. All right. According to these two over here, I don't know about you, Joe. We don't talk about it a lot. Whenever I say blah, blah, blah has been fired, basically the two other things is it's all the team's fault. It's not it's not the coach's fault. It's not the manager's fault. And we've talked about this a lot. We can always talk about this again later, but it's never the manager's fault. I personally think firing the head coach gives the team a spark and lets the team know you've fucked up. And that's exactly why coaches are always on the hot seat. The four people that we're about to mention are certainly no different. Let's start this off with Jay. Who's on the hot seat this year?
Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona. And you wouldn't think that a coach who led his team to an 11-6 record and a wild card berth would be on the hot seat coming into the season, unless you're the rabbi who is an OG Cliff Kingsbury hater. But the Arizona head coach's seat is as warm as a summer day in Phoenix, and it ain't a dry heat he'll be feeling if the Cards either don't get out of the first round or, heaven forbid, don't make the playoffs at all out of the ultra-competitive NFC West, which had 3 teams with double-digit win totals, including the Super Bowl champion Rams, who pretty much run it back in an attempt to defend their crown. Now, Kingsbury has taken a 5-10-1 team that was 21st in total offense, 28th and 24th in passing offense, and 17th in scoring. They were actually 10th in rushing when he came on board, and turned it into that 11-6 team that was 8th in total offense, 10th in passing and rushing, and 11th in scoring last season, behind the talents of his hand-picked quarterback, Kyler Murray, who in 14 games put up another Pro Bowl season, 69.2% completion, 87 yards, 7.9 yards per attempt, 24 touchdowns versus 10 interceptions, and a 100.6 pass rating in just 14 games. Injuries were to key players definitely affected this team. Besides Murray, wide receiver one DeAndre Hopkins only played 10 games. Pass rusher extraordinary J.J. Watt only played 7 games. The offensive line struggled to have the same 5 guys each week. Coming into the season, Hopkins is going to miss the first 6 games for violations of the NFL's performance-enhancing drug policy. And they were already thin at wide receiver with, as Rabbi mentioned earlier, Christian Kirk signing with Jacksonville in free agency. Cards are hoping that the late pickup of Marquise Hollywood Brown, a teammate of Murray's at Oklahoma, the improvement of 2021 second-round pick Rondale Moore, and another year of A.J. Green staving off Father Time, as well as having tight end Zach Ertz for a full season, will give Kingsbury and Murray enough weapons while Hopkins is on the shelf. Cards have the second toughest strength of schedule, with their opponents combining for a 543 win percentage last season. On top of their usual brutal divisional schedule, they also face the AFC West, which may be the deepest division in terms of top-flight quarterbacks, and the NFC South, hello, Tom Brady in the Bucs. And on top of that, well, there was the offseason drama with Murray, who was looking for a long-term extension after the Cardinals exercised his 5th-year option in April with a $29 million guarantee for this coming season. He skipped all of the offseason workouts, deleted all references to the Cardinals from his social media accounts, and his agent released a statement saying the quarterback was seeking long-term stability and a new contract with the team following the end of the 21 season. He did show up for OTAs, and earlier today he did get the new contract he wanted, and it will lock him up through 2028. So Kingsbury has to figure out how to get along with his mercurial quarterback, and without his primary receiver. The Cards offense definitely struggled after Hopkins went down, and the drop-off in Murray's play was glaring. Was it about the things that Murray can't do, or about the play designs and play calls that Kingsbury and the Cardinals coaches won't do? Can James Conner find his mojo carrying the ball? He played 15 games last season, but was only above 4 yards per carry in 5 of them. He had 4 games where he averaged less than 3 yards per carry. Can J.J. Watt stay healthy? Can he put up Watt-like numbers? Has the rumored contentiousness between Kingsbury and GM Steve Keim and owner Michael Bidwell in the wake of the Cards getting their asses handed to them by the Rams in that NFC wildcard game dissipated? I give Kingsbury plenty of credit for steadily improving the Cardinals' offense and win totals over the past 3 seasons. But as the Rabbi has constantly and consistently reminded me, Kingsbury concurrently has given no reason for anyone in the NFL to believe that he can prevent the inevitable late season collapse, either due to injuries or being too focused on doing things his way that he can't get out of his own way and adapt in circumstances that require him to think outside of his own box from happening. Kyler Murray's contract indicates that the organization sees him as the future. So if this team backslides, we all know which guy whose first name starts with the letter K won't be here in 2023.
2-7 last 9 in his first year in 2019. 3-6 last 9 in 2020, and including the playoff game last year. 3-6 in 2021. And also remember, they had a chance against a pretty much dead Seattle team at home to have home field advantage in that wild card game against the Los Angeles Rams, and Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury didn't even look like they belonged in an NFL playoffs, and was pretty much the single reason against expanding the playoffs. Okay. Anthony, speaking of teams
you blame Kingsbury for.
Listen, again, the coach deserves a little bit of blame sometimes. It's not just the players, and there's not always excuses. Anthony, let's talk about another coach that lost in the opening round of the playoffs last year, Mike McCarthy.
Yeah, if you wanna back that up, by the coach and some of the blame, you just have to go to the final seconds of that wild card loss against San Francisco to kind of remind you of why Mike McCarthy's in the hot seat. Like he finished 6-10, missed the playoffs first year. Last year led the Cowboys to a 12-5 record. They won the division, but let's be honest, they did not look like they didn't look anywhere near as dominant as they did the first half of the season.
No.
Second half of the year, Dak Prescott's numbers slipped, his play fell off. And notably, the defense was starting that was so dominant, played so well the first half of the year, started to show some signs and some cracks as well, and it kind of culminated in that loss against San Francisco. You think about this, Prescott was terrible for 3 quarters, and the defense literally had no answer to the 49ers running game. So, in particular, Deebo Samuel in particular. But now you come into this year, whereas when you look at the Cowboys, their roster got notably worse than the team that walked off of off the field at AT&T Stadium last January. Your offensive line has definitely regressed. They guys like Amari Cooper is gone. So the wide receiver core is not as talented, not as deep talented wise. And Prescott is kind of under the gun a little bit because he did not play well the last month and a half of the season. And you look at, and also you think about Mike McCarthy, he's going to have to get to the conference championship game to save his job because already there was these rumors about a guy named Drew that coached in New Orleans for over a decade.
That'd be Sean, by the way, not Drew. Drew might have coached that team, but you're talking about Sean.
Yeah, I mean, I got Sean. Yeah, a guy named Sean that, you know what? I think he coached, he was a coordinator at Cowboys not too long ago, but Bill Parcells coached that team.
Yep.
I mean, maybe I was frozen in ice over the last 2 decades. I kind of remember that. But Jerry Jones, we know what he likes to do. He loves big names, and obviously, and Mike McCarthy. It is be honest. The NFC East is not a great division to say the least. So you would think by talent alone, the Cowboys would be the predominant favorites every year, but we never see that. But for whatever reason, and I made a joke about this, and I got to throw Charlamagne the God's name out there because I have gone back and forth on social media with this. For whatever reason, the Cowboys have the talent and never gels the way you would think a team that's capable of winning a Super Bowl would do that. They can win. If Dallas teams were won on paper, the Cowboys would be winning Super Bowls every year, but that's not how it works. And when you look at the Cowboys right now, I don't see they're going to be a 12-win team again because this offensive line is really bad. It's not even close to the salvageable offensive line that it was a year ago. And now you have Prescott needing to once again try to make lemonade out of lemons with less of a receiving core. So Mike McCarthy, after the wait dates ended last year, and the final seconds, obviously, with the confusion with Prescott and the clock and giving it and the lineman not giving it to the line judge to line up. Everything that went wrong, and now you have Sean Payton rumors coming along. Mike McCarthy is definitely on a hot seat as it is when you're already a Cowboys head coach and Jerry Jones your boss. But now it's even bigger that the Cowboys have to make the playoffs and go on some kind of a playoff run because missing the playoffs are one and done. It's pretty much guaranteed. Mike McCarthy is going to be an ex-head coach next season.
Anthony, it's actually chicken salad out of chicken shit. And Rabbi, in the case of Dallas, I do blame Mike McCarthy. So there you go.
I agree. No, I think a
Keep
lot
my
of
language clean.
Hey,
I
barely
dropped
dropped any
show.
type of profanity. I felt compelled to do that because it's McCarthy and it's Dallas.
It is, well, no, because of all of the clock decisions Mike McCarthy did last year, apparently he almost went to Andy Reid pre-Kansas City, the way he looked at clock management. Some of the decisions the man made were just baffling out there. And honestly, I would have been perfect. would have thought it would be weird to fire somebody after, I think it was 1 or 2 seasons at 12-5, but that would have been perfectly justifiable. I know the media always makes a bigger deal out of everything, but this really seems justifiable. Okay. I am about to put a guy who is literally the favorite to win Coach of the Year this year on the hot seat. But you know what? I gotta put Brandon Staley on blast. Last season was a very
Hater.
promising season for him, but honest to God, there were just so many weird 4th down calls and a lot of late season just baffling decisions that Staley made. I know there's the new, you're going for it on 4th down at almost any cost, but the guy goes for 4th down inside of his own 5 at the 4-yard line when you're basically no one scoring during the game against Kansas City, and you need to make it. He just makes so much baffling decisions. I feel like the Los Angeles / San Diego Chargers have just been done in by bad coaching over the past years. Like Anthony Lynn was a guy who almost never knew how to do a late game situation. Even Marty Schottenheimer in big games just did not know how to close. This is one thing that
you want to throw North Turner into that mix, Rabbi? Sure.
We can throw North Turner into that mix, but we're talking about coaches that really had potential with the teams that they saw, because every single year, I hear everybody that's saying the Los Angeles Chargers should be the favorites in that division. The Los Angeles Chargers should be the favorites in that division. When you have a division where Mahomes is playing, where you have a division where Russell Wilson is the quarterback on another team, and when you have another team who probably has the most talent of offense of any team in that division, the fact that everybody is just
don't forget about the Raiders. Don't forget about
that's the team I'm talking. That's the team I'm talking about, because they have really a wide receiver who has unlimited range in Devontae Adams. But what just confuses me about all of this is just the love the Chargers get. When the Chargers, almost in the second half of the seasons in the last few years, and Joe, you've seen it time and time again, they just can't get out of their own way. And usually the head coach is representative of the fact that that team can get out of their own way. So guess what? The Los Angeles Chargers in 2022 might not get out of their own way. And honestly, I know Brandon Staley is the young, hot 40-year-old or younger head coach, but if he can't get out of his own way, why should he bear the brunt of nothing when the whole entire team is going to get thrown under the bus?
You know what's funny? Because we were watching that. We actually did a show during that Thursday night game. We kept asking, Rabbi, you and I, we kept asking each other, what is he doing? With the 4th down calls. I literally think that cost him the game against Kansas City.
And don't forget, if the man doesn't call a timeout in the game against the Las Vegas Raiders, his team very likely goes to the playoffs.
All right,
it's just logic.
All right, let Joe give us his head coach.
I will let Joe give it to us, because his is probably the Captain Obvious answer of who's on the hot seat.
It is, but you remember the week after I said that the guy from San Diego should get fired. It didn't make any sense. I picked my favorite guy, Matt Rule, whose entire interview process was, who's going to pay me the most money and guarantee it? Otherwise, I'm not coming for the interview. So that should have given everybody, he thought he was done. He thought he was the genius. He was going to walk in and, this is going to be Baylor all over again. And that's just not how it works. And, plenty of these guys have figured this out, that it doesn't work that way. Chip Kelly and guys that walk in that have always had this breadth of talent to choose from, because you can draft 8 running backs from high school and have them all on your team and you'll play. It doesn't work that way in the NFL. You got to go with who you get in your own little draft. So I think Matt Rule's got to be on the hot seat. And even though he's getting dealt a bad hand in what he has to choose from to play quarterback, and he's had a couple of years without Christian McCaffrey, who, you walk into this job thinking you have a number wide receiver / receiver in the league, and he doesn't get to play for you, that obviously puts a damper on things. And the guy's gotten hurt like in week 2. So it's not even that he can prepare for not having him. It's not like the guy got hurt in training camp or something. So although he's got some bad breaks, he's got this owner who's a little bit, he's a little bit of a quick trigger. He says things that maybe he takes back in a little while, but this guy is a young guy. He wants to win. He wants to solidify that area of the country as Carolina, as the Panther nation. And if he doesn't get to a winning team pretty soon, that's going to dissipate. And, they'll start talking city and all kinds of stuff that's going on down there. So I don't think you can have a guy in that role who, again, touted it, brought in his own flag, touted his own horn as, he wouldn't even fly up to go to interview with the Giants unless they guaranteed him that they would pay them more money than Carolina without the guy interviewing at all, without saying a word to them. That's all he cared about was how much money he was going to make. So I think that's all come back to roost a little bit for him. And again, when you have this choice, and it's not even the choice between Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, is if Mayfield gets hurt, you're stuck with Sam Darnold. You are, and again, and you traded for Sam Darnold. You didn't just pick him up off the street. You actually traded to get this guy on your team.
Second-round pick, by the way.
Where you had to go call Cam Newton and say, will you please come back and play for us? Who had one really good game, his first game he played back, and then he was back to realizing I should have stayed on the couch because this isn't a lot of fun. These are the decisions that get coaches fired. And as far as game decisions, you talk about it like the guy in San Diego who makes bad game decisions. At least he hasn't made any bad decisions like sitting Herbert or doing things of that nature. This guy is stuck. If he loses McCaffrey again, who is starting to get into that injury type person,
it's over.
And he's gonna you lose Baker Mayfield to some injury and you lose McCaffrey and you're the Jets from 2 years ago, go over well with his new owner. So I think that he has to get off to a good start. He has to show that they made the right decision to bring in Baker Mayfield because they waited such a long time to get that done. That could have been done months ago.
They couldn't agree on.
They could have sold them a little bit. They could have gotten them into training camp. They could have said, "This is our system. Here's the new offensive coordinator again. That's now working with 2 quarterbacks he doesn't know." That's never a good thing.
No, the issue with getting Baker in earlier, Joe, was that the 2 teams have been talking since the draft. They just could not come to an agreement until that moment, how much of Mayfield's guaranteed salary the Browns would kick in. And they also had to convince Baker to take a pay cut on some of that guaranteed money in order to facilitate that deal. That's what hung it up, which, that's what happens when you're the Cleveland Browns and you give guys who don't deserve it those types of guaranteed contracts. And they did it again.
But if you go to your owner and say, "Hey, this is the guy we need to make to be a success," and then you go, "Oh, by the way, we got to give him a pay cut and we got to get somebody else to pay him because he really isn't that good." And what do you wind up getting, a 5th round pick or something for him?
Something like that.
It could be nothing really important.
It's a conditional 5th. Mayfield plays over 70% of the offensive snaps. It gets bumped up to a 4th.
Okay, so
it wasn't like
score for the guy. So is the belief even there that he can be effective? We know Sam Darnold wasn't it. So what are we going to do until we get to the draft next year? And I don't think he gets to the draft next year.
I agree with you on that, Joe. And to me, of all of the strange decisions that have been made of late by that organization, the one that nobody is really talking about, and I guess being from New York, we're the only ones who can really truly speak to it. Hiring McAdoo as his offensive coordinator, to me, is about as head scratching a move as it gets. The guy is very much my system. He's not adaptable at all. He has shown no propensity to cater his scheme to what he's been given. And if he continues with that mindset in this scenario with what he does have, I think that's going to, that's going to be the thing that doesn't matter whether Baker stays healthy or whether McCaffrey stays healthy or Robbie Anderson, turns out that he likes playing with Baker Mayfield. If McAdoo's offense is, becomes what we saw it, devolve into when he was here in New York, it won't matter how healthy these guys are. That offensive scheme is going to doom them.
Well, Jay, he was handed, to talk about a dichotomy, he was handed a 2-time Super Bowl MVP champion as a quarterback, and he got fired from that job because he couldn't make it work. Because he couldn't go, to the point where we're out of town and played, the famous game that they played without Eli Manning, and you're like, so how's it going to go with these two clowns? He was given the top quarterback in the league. All he had to do was do what he was good at. Like you say, adapt to the schemes and the strengths of those guys. These guys don't have any strengths. And if they can't do it, they're going to wind up with 3 wins and they're going to look like heck. And the owner's going to just get rid of everybody because he's got to start from scratch. He's got to start from scratch next year, almost without a doubt.
You told me to get up, and then you went and mentioned Ben McAdoo. Jesus Christ. All I got to say is this. One thing I really want to get into, because we talked about it a lot, is when does an injury go from bad luck to part of your issues? And we talked about it a lot today. We talked about it with Daniel Jones. We talked about it with Saquon Barkley. We talked about it with Christian McCaffrey in this segment. We don't have time right now, but I really want to get your guys' takes eventually on where injuries are really part organization, especially in football, and part player. All right. Mm-hmm. Before we go, I wanted to mention why I mentioned that old man yelling at a cloud about 90 hours ago during our open. One thing that I'm very interested in seeing is the evolution of streaming. This little thing right here, this is what you're going to be watching everything on for many, many years to come. In a recent interview, I actually also had that too, but decided not to bring in for this one. Yep. Oh, nice. We got 2 Rokus. Okay. So in a recent interview, Roger Goodell said basically the out-of-town package is going to go to streaming in the next cycle. And I know if you're watching this on any direct TV, it's probably raining and you're already not getting any actual sound out of this. But guess what? Streaming is going to be the thing that's going to go into the future. And it's something I'm very surprised that a lot of leagues has actually done. Major League Baseball puts a lot of their packages now on streaming, whether it be a Facebook game of the week, the Apple TV Friday night doubleheader, the
Peacock
Yankees
11
putting
a.m.
20. No, the Peacock
11 a.m.
Okay, this is my rant. You don't have to tell me I was getting to that. The Peacock 12 p.m. game of the week, or even the Yankees actually having Friday night games on Amazon Prime. And I'm sick and tired of the people saying, wow, where's my game? Get with the future. The one thing baseball has actually been doing over the last few years is actually moving up in the world when it comes to streaming. They might be archaic on almost everything else, but at least they realize it's better to get your product on Apple TV, even if it does have weird win probabilities in the corner that no one really understands, instead of getting 0.005s on ESPN every single week for the rest of your entire life on Monday and Wednesday. The good thing is there's a lot of groups there's a lot of sports organizations that are doing this too. The WNBA puts games on Amazon Prime, Twitch, and other places on a regular basis. The NHL put most of their package this year on ESPN Plus, and also Hulu, which is a lot cheaper than ESPN Plus, thank the Lord. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you have what the NFL is doing this year, putting their Thursday night package, which usually is still 50-50, but now it's 50-50 on Amazon Prime, and you actually get to enjoy that package. Plus, you get 79,000-year-old Al Michaels still calling games after NBC pushed him out into a little group on Amazon Prime calling games with Kirk Herbstreit, of all people. But guess what? I'm interested in that because it really just shows the natural improvement of what television is going. I don't know what the NBA is doing, even though I do work for, I've done work for the past, but They're going to get there too. I have a feeling. Now, almost every organization is going to get there. And when next time you yell at the fact that I can't watch my NFL game on Thursday night because I really, really, really want to see the Chargers lose to the Chiefs again on Amazon Prime in week 2.
On a bad
Guess what?
fourth down call by Brandon Staley.
Which is very likely to happen. It's a spoiler alert, and it's probably going to end on a touchdown by Juju Smith-Schuster. It doesn't matter. This is exactly what the future is. And if you don't like it, then don't do it. And I know, Joe, you're one of those old school people, but
No. I only have one comment of the differences in the leagues. I will go anywhere and listen to anybody do an NFL game because I want to watch the NFL game. I've put up with the Tony Romos and Jim Nances and Joe Bucks for my entire life. After Pat Summerall hasn't been a good guy and John Madden hasn't been a good team since. But I will watch NFL games on anything you tell me I got to watch it on. When I watch one of 162 baseball games, I want to hear my announcers.
I
don't
agree.
want to hear Katie Nolan
completely
go,
agree.
"Oh, it's so fun out here."
Hey,
I don't want to hear
you can
some
touch
girl
on
tell me
anybody
that
else. Leave the
Gary
hospital person
Sanders-
alone there, buddy.
that Gary has
Pass
to
about
not
9.
play for the Yankees when he doesn't play for them anymore. I want to hear my announcers. Even Gary Cohen said it the other night. He goes, "Oh, so the better we get, the less games we get to do because they keep taking them and moving them to different things."
I agree, and I
I'll
think
get up
that's
at
more.
3 a.m. and watch it on anything if he's doing the game.
Yeah,
And
So
I
think
agree.
that's where baseball misses.
as do I.
I agree
Yeah.
too on that, but I think that's more of another point because baseball, unlike football, unlike basketball, and unlike hockey, they do have their local announcers calling playoff games for the first round. And there's somebody who almost depends on their local teams a lot more. There's a lot of baseball exclusives. So if you want to hear John Smoltz be a curmudgeon, then I don't know what to tell you. You're watching the right sport.
But
Congrats.
again, I don't mind the Wayne Rendazzos and John Smoltz doing a game. It's when they put 3 people on who've never watched a baseball game.
Again, I think what is more about is Apple is trying to do a lot of
that
stuff.
doesn't add anything to it.
Right.
No, I understand completely, but again, this is Apple. This is their first foray into actually doing these things. I think they'll learn. Peacock
The game
does
has
that.
to, but the game has to matter. ESPN.
No,
did
it's
this
understandable.
years ago. ESPN will go off and do interviews with 3 people and put the game in a little box. And you're like, can I watch the game while I don't need to see the 3 people who are talking.
Right. Yeah, and
the game.
and
If you
Joe,
want to put the interview on, that's fine. But
Yeah.
why are you taking up the screen with 3 people sitting in their houses talking to each other?
Yeah, and I'll say this, and it's something that Joe, I know you probably can relate to. Back in the day, there have always been times, and even probably in recent vintage, where if you didn't like the national team that was calling the game, what did you do? You turned you muted your television and you put the local radio team on and let them be the voice of the game while you watched your TV on mute. And honestly, you don't like the way Apple TV's team broadcasts a game that your team is playing in. You don't like the way Peacock's guys are calling, your game or Amazon Prime or whoever. Turn the volume off. Your team is, you're always going to have a local broadcast team on radio. Listen to them call the game while you watch it on the tube.
Yeah, and I do that with the Giants all the time. I put Papa and Banks on, and I figure out how to sync it, because the delays are different. But I still think baseball is a different animal.
Oh, I agree. You're 100%.
The Dodger fans want Vince Scully to do the game. We want Gary Cole. We have the best broadcast team in New York for a reason. Let them do more games. And all you have to do, and Rabbi, my point of this is, if you took their broadcast like MLB Network does, they just take that broadcast and put it on MLB Network. Why not just do that? Put that on Peacock and do your own commercials.
Well, to be fair, by the way, Peacock.
You're paying nothing except running your own commercials. Let them just do the game.
Well, Jay agrees with you for the next 15 minutes. To be fair, Peacock does actually have every single week one guy who knows one of the teams and
Right,
one guy
they
who
do
knows
do
one
that.
of the other teams.
The-
Yeah, they
They
did.
do
Yeah.
that.
Play-by-play
And they
guy
made-
is a national. Yeah, they do
And
have
the
that.
play-by-play and the play-by-play guy is one of the best play-by-play guys out there.
Yes,
Jason
that's
Benetti.
fair.
I will listen to
That's
him
fair.
do
They
that.
do pull in one analyst from each.
Yeah.
Each
That's
team.
kind of the way it should happen, but again, that also kind of relates to another story for another time. But we are done. That was a rant sponsored by everybody,
saying.
apparently.
Speaking of time, we're out of it.
Yes, that's why I'm doing it. Jesus, man. God, that's a rant sponsored by everybody. For Jay Kaplan, Anthony Strait, and thank you, Joe Tufaro, for coming back on here. We have a lot more to talk about even before we get to opening day, so we hope to see you again. He's on many different platforms. Tough Dan on Twitter. Content is ramping up. Watch out. My name is merely Stephen Rabinowitz. I might be a little bit of a phrase there, so I apologize for the going below here. All the usual socials, and I'm just going to do them all. Facebook.com/OnTheSportsLines Live, YouTube.com/OnTheSportsLines On Demand. Twitter is @ONTH Sportslines, where Mr. Kaplan will put up a lot of different things, links, and other stuff that you might want to enjoy. Go watch the damn Jeter thing, since I only have like one segment left, Jay. For everybody on Sports Lines, we'll see you next time. Good night. And everybody, show your road dudes!
Good night, everyone.
Amazon.